Hi all, Rick here with a breakdown on what is in my opinion one of the best looking vessels from the TOS era of ship design, but one that remains non-canon as of the making of this video. The Ranger class cruiser. Now, with a name like Ranger, you'd be unsurprised to learn that there have been other such vessels with this designation beyond the one I'm focusing on here. The main two I could find were the Ranger class exploration scout ship, the prototype NX-315 of 2215, then the Ranger class carrier of 2280. The one I'm talking about is from Star Trek Online, and while the Ranger of 2215 does not stand in contradiction with this video, the 2280 carrier does. The 2215 could simply be a scout ship prototype that never entered full production, while the carrier was renamed the Ark Royale class in Star Trek Online. Hey, so look at that, they're all as canon as each other, which is to say, not. Anyway, it's a good ship. As with the others of this era, it was created for Star Trek Online's Agents of Yesterday expansion that required 23rd century ships to facilitate time travel escapades for that game. The remastered version was done by Ramon. In-universe, the Ranger had been around for an unclear amount of time, but we can draw from some other sources to build a more solid idea. The Ranger was designed unapologetically to be a long-range, rapid combat resolution vessel. That is to say, a battlecruiser in all but name. It was created along the same lines of development as the Constitution class, alongside the Gemini and Perseus class vessels. The ship was created to be a more combat-capable version of the Constitution, in essence. For this, it sacrificed some of the versatility and scientific application in favour of more robust weaponry and a few unique additions. After the upgrading of the fleet post-Klingon War, the Ranger was to operate for a long time away from Starfleet installations on patrol and defensive duties, as well as crisis response. Basically, it was to do everything the Constitution could except the detailed scientific studies and diplomatic duties. Developed sometime during the 2260s, the USS Ranger NCC 1750 was the first of the line to enter service, launching just prior to 2268. It saw routine deployment along the Klingon and Romulan borders, acting as a deterrent and occasional skirmisher against raids. By 2270, the line had entered production as a long-ranging combat cruiser to wave the flag at the borders of the UFP space and push back where needed. Interestingly, this may have been its most popular and prolific era, but it was very short-lived, as in 2271, merely 3 years later, Starfleet initiated the Total Modification Program, which began to take a look at the aging fleet and implemented the next stage of developments over the following 2 decades. This is the same development project that overhauled the Constitution to grant it a few more decades of life, while these advancements were distilled into the Excelsior, Constellation and other movie-era vessels. With the decline in Klingon Empire hostilities around the end of the 23rd century, the need for the Ranger class diminished, but the vessel had proven its worth in its short-lived heyday as enduring and capable of long-term missions. It was clear it still had more to give, and so was also slated for an overhaul in the same fashion as the Miranda or Constitution classes were. Termed the Ranger II, the Ranger classes were pulled in and systematically overhauled to function more in the vein of a multi-role and multi-mission exploration starship. But back to the original Ranger for now as we look into its technology. The Ranger class was built for its role with noticeable modifications to the standard starship frame and shares a lot of style with the NX class refit. In terms of specialised tech, it had a photonic decoy beam, which essentially created a holographic echo of the Ranger, while sensor distorting systems aboard it also projected the same energy signature into the facsimile to add believability. This decoy did more than just soak up fire, however, as when it was struck with energy weapons, a draining effect would occur attempting to weaken the attacker's shielding. A rather unique piece of equipment that clearly could have a myriad of other uses, but seems to be limited by its time and range. Kinetic damage, however, would readily reveal the duplicity. So, moving on to the armaments. The Ranger class was heavily outfitted with numerous weapons points, and had a unique Hellbore system. At the front of the vessel there were 4 prominent phaser cannons that served as the main batteries of the ship that could fire in pulses or beams, depending on the need. It had 2 rear-facing ports too. There were several turrets with dual beam points atop the bridge and 2 single beam points at the rear. There were 2 front-facing photon torpedo launchers and 2 rear-facing ones on the floating platform. Now, these beam weapons had a special tech added to them known as the Hellbore Light system. Phaser bombardments from the Ranger left a building charge at their point of impact against shields, that further transferred damage to that point across the rest of the shield grid with consistent strikes. So there was additional stress applied to the shields of the afflicted vessel. If that energy reached a critical mass, it would detonate in a plasma-based explosion, potentially overloading the shields of the targeted craft altogether. In terms of warp, the Ranger seemed on par with the Constitution, but slightly more tuned, with its matter-antimatter warp core reaching warp 9 on the old scale, and being able to cruise at the factor 8, 1 whole factor higher than the Constitution. A key feature of this ship was its incredible agility and widely spaced impulse engines, which increased its manoeuvrability and let it bring its front-facing cannons to bear quickly. Combined with its powerful energy supply, the Ranger was indeed a fast vessel, and a reliable one too. Like the Constitution, it was expected to operate for long periods away from core Federation worlds, running back-to-back missions with only the occasional starbase stop to tune and maintain it. Nevertheless, as mentioned earlier, the Ranger began to see a rethinking as soon as 2271, as part of the modification program. The Ranger 2, in addition to sporting a different look and new warp system indicative of the switch to vertical warp cores, also received a combat shuttle bay and a wing of skirmish-capable small craft. Some models were also reputed to have been equipped with a Lyran-developed expanding sphere generator. This device required a 15-second charge time and created a radiation field around the ship in a sphere that gradually grew, lessening in intensity the wider the diameter. As a close sheath, it could be used as a ram or to scrape against obstacles, damaging them, while at its furthest it could simply damage enemy vessels or potentially disintegrate incoming projectiles. An adaptive system that had more uses than just a weapon. The Ranger class would go on to inspire the future Paladin class timeship of the 26th century, while cementing itself a place in the legacy of Starfleet design. Never really produced in high quantities, the Ranger seemed to have not been around very long, with it emerging into prominence just as Starfleet was beginning to move to overhaul its ship designs once more. The tail end of the original series era saw it benefit from these advancements made, and in many ways it was a match for the aging Constitution, but even better in some areas. However, considering it was made for combat and patrol over exploration, despite the same multi-mission abilities, it was never used as the poster class of the fleet. The Ranger remains one of my favourite vessels from this apocryphal era of Star Trek, and it fits alongside its sister vessels while occupying a believable role within the fleet, that of, well, a Ranger. It gets out there for a long time, patrols, defends, and then moves on to its next assignment, seldom returning to the core of Federation territory save to resupply or for major repair. Thanks for watching this breakdown on the Ranger class cruiser. I've been Rick, and until the next one, thanks again, and goodbye.